Hello, Right Anyway Summiteers. This is Ann Hawley, and today I'm pleased to bring you my conversation with author, lecturer, and writing coach Bill Kenower. Bill is the author of 3 books, Write Within Yourself, Fearless Writing, and Everyone Has What It Takes. He's published interviews with a wide range of great fiction, memoir, and nonfiction authors, and he's the host of the weekly Fearless Writing podcast, where he delivers short bites of inspiration and insight for writers in an under 10-minute format every Friday. You can learn more about him at williamkenower.com. And now, here's our conversation. Bill Kenower, welcome to the Right Anyway Summit 2025. It's so nice to have you here.
Oh, it's good to be back. And it's good to be back. I love the summit. It's a lot of fun. Great what you guys are doing.
It's so nice to have you back, and you have a lot to offer our very broad audience of very different kinds of writers. So I like to be pretty specific, and, not everything can be for everyone, but a particular concern of mine, and I think of probably more people in our audience than they might realize themselves, is maybe part of the reason they're having trouble writing anyway, writing beyond the obstacles that they feel, is maybe, as I have been, they are trying to write something that isn't what they really should be writing, what their heart really wants them to write. I know you have some great thoughts on this, and I'm hoping you can kind of get into it a little. And one of the questions that you asked the last time we talked, I think would really be worth hearing more about is, I think you said, how can I make my whole life like what it feels like to be writing?
Yeah. It's really it's my current obsession, which is I want to live like I write. I want to be what I've called the all-day artist. And we can talk about what should you be writing. My theory of the case, and I don't even think it's a theory, I think it's just a fact, that all of life, every moment of is creative. And the more deliberate we can be in what we do, think, and say, just like when we write, the page is blank. Nothing's going to happen until we make a choice. And every one of those words on the page is a choice, a deliberate choice. It's not always the choice we keep. It's sometimes what seems like a good idea in theory isn't in practice when we actually bring it to the blank page. But writing teaches us to understand that we're the ones responsible for everything goes on the page. So how do we make choices that create the thing we want to create? And, like most writers, for many years, I thought, well, writing was a discrete practice, and it's about language and story. And okay, stories, I use stories outside of life, but mostly it's about language and stories and characters and image and blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't apply to the rest of life. But the more I have lived and the more I have just looked at my own life and looked at where my unhappiness is. And in fact, this concept of the all-day artist really came about from all things from when I was teaching a workshop, one of the more popular workshops that I teach at these conferences, fearless marketing, right? I used to call it marketing for authors who hate to market. And that's a lot of writers, and probably something you guys talk about. Here's my theory on this, and you're welcome to borrow it. Just attribute it to me. No, it's this, that I think the primary reason writers think they hate to market. One of it is that they don't like to be seeing themselves as salesmen, and they have ideas that it's beneath them and all that. But I think the real reason is this. If you're a writer, you have created on purpose, and you know the pleasure of an idea coming to you and putting it down and being satisfied by that experience of saying, yeah, that's what I want. You like being creative. There's no reason to do this if you don't enjoy the process of being creative. You might make money. I hope you make money, but that can't be the reason you do it initially, because it can take too long to get to that point. And then marketing comes, and the writer believes, I just have to do it, but it's not creative. So I just have to go chop wood. And they are resistant to it because they know what it is to do something to be creative. And they know what it is to do something that's not creative. And they know how much harder it is to be uncreative than creative, because they feel like, well, just do this on Facebook and send out these number of emails. And this is sort of these rules they follow, but it's not creative. And so when I teach that class, it's trying to reframe marketing as a creative experience. And the more I taught it, the more I realized, well, really, I'm asking them to apply to marketing what they do in writing from a broad sense. And I began to see how I could apply it to every moment in my life. Because every time I treat life as a creative experience, I feel like I have power, and I feel like life doesn't feel random. But when I don't treat it as a creative experience, I lose my power, and the outcome of all events seems random and kind of pointless to me. And so for the last, I don't know, couple years, I'm writing a new book about how to apply the foundational concept of the arts, and writing is, of course, part of that. Not so much the craft of sentences and characters, but what you do when you sit down every day and face the unknown on purpose, deliberately facing the unknown, because that's what all creation, if you already knew it, there'd be nothing to create. So you're trying to create something that didn't exist before. And so how do you apply the skills that you acquire while you do that to the rest of your life? How do you learn to listen more than think? How do you learn not to get into people's heads? How do you learn to trust your intuition? How do you learn to follow your curiosity? All these things that every artist needs, that is applicable to every single moment of your life.
So how does that look in your day-to-day life? What would I be looking to change, for example?
Well, last time we talked, we were talking about, are you writing the right, you and I had our own conversation. Were you writing the right genre? Whether that's, for some people, it's like, well, instead of writing cozy mysteries, I should be writing thrillers, or in some cases, it's like, I don't want to write fiction. I got to write nonfiction. That was the journey I had to take. And the question of what is the right genre, and that applies whether it's poetry, everything from poetry to romance, is what I call a creative question, by which I mean it's a question to which only you have the answer. Only you can possibly answer the question, what should I write? What's the story I want to tell? Just like only you can possibly answer the question, who should I be with? What's the work I should do? What's the show on Netflix I should watch? Like only you have the answers to what pleases you. No one can do it for you. And of course, it applies on the macro to like, what's the genre? Right down to, does this sentence please me? So here's one of my stories around that I think is a great example, is Maurice Sendak, who wrote Where the Wild Things Are. And I watched this little documentary on that book. It was a beautiful example of the inner artist within all of us that needs to be satisfied. Initially, the book was going to be called Where the Wild Horses Are. And he was drawing all these horses. Now, Maurice Sendak is a very skilled illustrator. And that's not true of every artist. My wife's not really like that, but she's a great artist. But he can draw anything. And so he showed the sketches of the horses, and they were gorgeous. They were just these fluid, realistic, in my mind, beautifully rendered horses, and he hated them. They were all wrong. And then he went back, and for those of you who are familiar with the book, the monsters and Where the Wild Things, or the wild things, are these big sort of cartoonish, he based them, he said, on his Eastern European Jewish grandparents who he would see staring at him over the crib or whatever as a kid, who seemed broad and sort of surreal to him. And so Where the Wild Horses became Where the Wild Things Are. And the point of that story is he looked at those horses that to you and to me would look perfect. Like there's nothing wrong with them. But to him, they were all wrong. People have read my stuff and said, that was such a great novel. I was working on these novels when I decided to abandon them. And these people I knew were like, well, those were great. I don't know what you're talking about. I was like, it wasn't doing it. There was something I wasn't finding. And so the question is, how effortless is it for you to lay your attention on the thing you're working on? And how much do you have to hold it there because your mind wants to go somewhere else? And in our story, in our little conversation, you mentioned just getting interested in this one little aspect of language that surprised you, and you didn't know where it was going. And this, to me, is one of the challenges and the benefits of the artistic approach to life. When we're interested, our curiosity, which is the thing that is always looking to latch onto something, all our curiosity ever says, let's say you're writing a story, gives you an idea. Curiosity says, go that way. I don't know if they can see me. I'm pointing, go that way, it says. And then our minds say, but where's that going? You're going to take me somewhere successful? I want to go somewhere successful. I want to go somewhere where they sell books. Will you please tell me where we're going? And your curiosity says, we're going that way. But what's that way? That way. That way. There we go. That way. And that's all it ever gives you. It gives you, go that way, and you will enjoy each step. And if you can simply follow it, it will lead you somewhere. You don't know where it's going. But if you like the first step, and you like the second step, and you like the third step, you will like where it takes you in the end. it can't guarantee you the number of sales or how big the contract is, but it will guarantee you that you will love and be satisfied with what you've created. And that gives you the best chance to sell it. It's hard to sell something. If you are writing something that isn't what you actually want to write, you are rejecting yourself. You have pre-rejected yourself. And so, of course, the world will reject you also. And they'll give you different reasons. Well, the characters didn't quite resonate with me, or the middle seemed a little, but what it is there's something about it that clouds the clarity of it because you've rejected it, because you've rejected yourself in the writing of it. And it hurts to do that. And the pain you feel when you hear from agents or editors or whoever is just a reflection of the pain you felt when you did it to yourself, when you didn't write the thing that is what is actually in your heart. And so you have to accept your own interest, accept where your curiosity is going, accept it, and then follow it. Does that make sense?
It does. I have a couple questions that come to my mind, and I imagine they will come to other people's mind. One is, let's just say for argument's sake that I'm very, very lazy, and I know myself to be lazy. So I don't like to go to a lot of trouble, and I'm aware of that. And so there's a discipline problem there. And so how do I, or how does another writer tell the difference between I'm just interested in this, I'm going to follow step by step, between that and I'm just being undisciplined and lazy? And
I don't believe in laziness.
all right,
I don't believe
good. Let's talk about that.
You don't believe in laziness. Richard Bach's son, who I interviewed once, we said laziness is just like calling an unplugged toaster broken. And I think it's really true. Like, we are lazy when we think we have to make ourselves do things. And I am, quote, lazy too, because I don't want to have to do anything. I want to do what I like to do. And if I think I have to do it, I avoid doing it in one way or another. I like having fun. That's what I like to do. And one of the importance of finding your genre, finding your story, is it is way easier to bring your attention to something that is exciting to you than something that is kind of exciting to you, but really you just got to do the work to get it done, to get it sold. And the more you try to make yourself do something as opposed to choose something that is just naturally interesting to you, the lazier you will become. When we're young, we're driven by the fear of failure and poverty. And they can get you pretty far. But you get to a certain age, you're like, I am tired of making myself do things. For me, what happened is once a day, I was writing 400-word essays, inspiring essays for writers for Author Magazine. So I'd do that. I would give myself 40 minutes. That's all I had. I would have to write them that fast, which I would, because I had to do 5 a week. And then later in the day, I would write my fiction. And I started noticing how much easier it was to write inspiring essays than to write the fiction. Just how natural it felt, how it allowed a part of my voice that just wanted to come through. And I got tired of the sense of making myself do something. I don't ever want to make myself do anything. Never. And sometimes when I, quote, have to do something that I'm not inspired to do at that moment, instead of making myself do it, I'll kind of have a little conversation like, well, why is it you want to do it? Why do you want to write that email for promoting your podcast? What do you love about your podcast? Why do you want to share it? And if I kind of reconnect to why I'm doing it, it's much easier to write. But if I say, you got to do it, it's 2 weeks, you got to put one up there. Come on now. Now it's homework and I'm in school and I just want to play wiffle ball, And so I think that when you're trying to make yourself do something, you'll be lazy. Or if you think failure is inevitable, you'll be lazy. Does that resonate?
Yeah, I'm speaking here to Americans, I think, more than other cultures, but we have a very strong ethic, grind.
Yes.
If it doesn't hurt, it's not worth doing, kind of no pain, no gain type of culture. And that's very, very pervasive. It's relatively easy for someone my age to say, oh, I don't have to worry about that anymore, because I don't. But what do you have to say to people who are grappling with that?
Well, part of the problem is, I hate to bash on public education too much, but a lot of what school is saying, whether you're interested or not, do this. Whether you're interested in bugs or not, write an essay about bugs. I once sat with a teacher, my elementary school teacher of my son, and I was like, so you're teaching writing, huh? Yeah, they don't want to do it. I'm like, let them write anything they're interested in. She looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, take it from someone who does this every day. It is hard for me to write something I don't care about. And this is what I do for a living. You think these kids are going to want to write about something they don't want to write about. It reminded me of the story of this college professor who was really frustrated with his students. The stuff that they were giving him was just such, this was when blogs were a big thing. He went online and read some of their blogs about, Real Housewives or whatever, but they were writing about the things they were interested in, all of it better than anything they gave him, because they were writing about something they actually gave a damn about. It is so hard. I had to write a piece for Writer's Digest. I had proposed this piece that was very craft oriented, and it is not the kind of stuff I wrote. And this is on a subject, memoir, that I'm passionate about. But I like the emotional part of writing. I like the fear we have to get over and the passion that drives us. I like writing about the emotional side of writing. But I proposed this craft piece, and it was like pulling teeth for me to write the thing. I did, because I had been paid. When I finished that piece, and it was only 800 words, and it was not long, but I'd write 2 paragraphs and have to stop because I was so bored by it. I said, never again. I can't do it. I just so need the emotional part. I love memoir. And I love writing, but it was painful for me because it was so not what I'm actually interested in. And at this point, I know too much what it feels like to write something I'm interested in, and I can tell when it's not there. And it is so hard to do when it's not there. And so all the people who say work hard, what they're doing is they're trying to get themselves to not avoid the thing they were told they need to do in order to be successful. You need these grades, you need to get this job, like all the things you have to do in order to not fail, to not be poor, to not go hungry. I get it. It's scary. And things you're passionate about, that's for the weekend, or that's when you have enough money, or that's when you're whenever. But it is so impractical. The most practical thing you can do is something you are interested and excited by, because you will never be better. You will never do it longer. Why do people say, oh, it takes such discipline to write a book, it takes so long? Well, yeah, but it takes long usually because you aren't satisfied with it yet. And the reason you can hang around with it is because you want it to be better. Write music. And when we finish the producing, I can get really specific about like, no, the guitar has got to be just a little bit louder right there. And we have to go over and over until it's what I want to hear. And that can seem disciplined, but it's just me wanting to hear what I want to hear. And I'm not hearing it yet. And so the same thing, I read my stuff. I wanted to read the way I wanted to read. And if it's not reading that way, it's not discipline. It's just I'm not satisfied. Like I'm not having to make myself do it. I want it to be the way I want it to be.
So what's the difference between that and perfectionism?
Perfectionism is worrying what people will think about it. Full stop. You're wanting it to be perfect so no one will criticize it.
Yeah.
That's what it is. There's no such thing as perfect, but there is beautiful. There is something that you enjoy. I was working with a client and she was like, well, I just have to accept it's never going to be perfect. And I say, well, can you accept it might be beautiful? And she's like, yeah. I was like, okay, let's settle for beautiful. So that's what perfectionism is. You're trying to make yourself bulletproof from criticism. And I don't care how good your piece is, someone's going to say, hey, Jude's a stupid song, goes on too long. Ode to Joy, boring. James Joyce, what the hell is he on about? Like, it doesn't matter who you are. You're never not going to be criticized, ever. And so that's what perfectionism is. It's just us trying to prevent the shame of not pleasing somebody else, right?
To kind of bring this back around to the question of what if where my interest leads me is away from what I really thought I should be writing or intended to write, or I promised something, all of that sort of thing. You told a little story. I think you called it God is Evolution or Evolution is God.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell that little story here?
Sure. So this was a fascinating story. So I'm waiting tables. I'm probably almost 40 years old. I'm still waiting tables. I'm writing novels. Everything's getting close. Everything's close. Oh, he's so talented. Nothing's coming through, but nothing's happening, right? Haven't sold a book. I'm still waiting tables. I'm miserable. And so the hour of the wolf, my friend Chris calls it, 1:30 a.m. rolls around. There I am in bed. My wife's asleep. My kids are asleep. And I'm awake and hating myself and my whole life. I love my wife. I love my kids. Doesn't matter. So I said, I've got to solve this problem that is my life. So I get up and I march out to my living room where it's dark, and I sit there and I say, okay, let's solve this problem. And what came to mind first, this was when Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins had published books about how ridiculous God is. God is not great, and the God delusion. So this re-stimulated this debate between the evolution and the scientists and the religious type. And I thought, this is ridiculous. And I thought, well, I think God and evolution are the same thing. I think they're just talking about the two sides of the same coin. I didn't know if it was true, but it seemed entirely possible. That's why they were arguing. And I would think about this in my head, trying to talk to scientists in my head to help them understand the religious people. I loved the thought of it. And so that's what came into my head. God is evolution. And not only did it come into my head, I thought, I need to not just think about it, but I need to imagine myself in an auditorium talking to a group of people, because it's easier to express something if I can just imagine an audience. And so I start doing that. Suddenly, I'm not sitting in my living room in front of a podium on a stage, in front of this audience. We're very interested in this. And I start sort of whispering, thinking it, really kind of almost imagining. And at that point, the part of my mind, the Calvinistic, let's work hard and take care of this part of my mind said, what are you doing? We're here to solve the problem of your life. This isn't solving anything. And I said, let me just, I'm liking this. This feels good. It felt good to imagine talking to these people. But that's part of my mind tried one more time to get me to quit. And then I finally said, and on we went. And I just kept talking about it. It was interesting. It was spiritual. It was philosophical. I'm a bit of a philosopher, I had to begin to admit at this point. And importantly, I like being in front of people. I like engaging people like that. I like being the guy behind the microphone. I get it. I get how to do that. It's a role someone has to play, and I know how to play it. And I like it. And so both things felt good to me. It felt good just to be talking about it. And so this went on for 15 minutes. And then I reached the end of some sentence. I seemed to have run out of things to say to that imaginary audience. And then the microphone went away and the walls went away and the audience went away. And I was back in my living room, just like where the Wild Things are when he comes back to his bedroom at night. I was just that way. And the problem of my life was no longer a problem. And I think of Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer. He's the guy who made his living helping dogs that were like ready to be put down because they were so violent. And he tells this fantastic story. I'll try to tell without getting choked up, about this dog that was really far gone. And he didn't know what to do. He was working with it, having a little luck. And then he remembered the dog's a hunting dog, that's the breed. And it so happened that Cesar Millan had raccoon urine. He had a bottle of, if you're Cesar Millan, you get a hold of these things, right? And so he took the raccoon urine and he poured a trail of it through the forest. And then he took the dog and he let it go. Dog smells the urine, and now he's on a trail. And he starts following the trail. And as he did, he settled down. He came back to himself because he was doing what he's supposed to do. And by the time he was done hunting, he was not freaking out anymore. And I always say, me talking to people about why we're here on Earth is my raccoon urine. If that makes sense. In other words, I came back to myself. So even though I was still a waiter and I didn't have a book, I was myself. And now the same thing happened to me when I was 25 and in LA and trying to make it as a screenwriter and just racing all around town, pushing and pushing and pushing. And then at night, I called Jen, who lived here in Seattle, who I'd met when I was 17. And we were together until she had to move away to Seattle at the end of our senior year. But now I was 1,500 miles closer to her. So I thought I would call her. She's in Seattle, I'm in LA, but I would spend an hour talking to her. And then I'd hang up and I'd go back to trying to be a successful screenwriter. And I'd talk to her again. And one night I hung up the phone and I felt still, whereas suppose I was running all the time. And I was like, oh, that's me. I come back to myself talking to her. And I was like, I'm out of here. Goodbye. So I went up to be with her. More raccoon urine. And so she came up with that metaphor, so she wouldn't mind being called it, I don't think. So, but in other words, you write the stuff you're supposed to write. Now you're yourself. You be with the person you're supposed to be with. Now you're yourself. Try to be someone just a little off. It's impossible. And so go find out what your success looks like. I know, look, I was going to be a novelist because that's all you're supposed to do. That's what a writer was, a novelist, or maybe a poet, but probably a novelist. So I just intellectually decided to be a novelist. I didn't ask myself the question, if you could publish anything, write anything, Bill, if you could write anything, regardless of whether it got published, what would it be? And it was not fiction. It came to me like that. It was this idea that no one is broken. And I knew it was nonfiction. And eventually, No One Is Broken became Everyone Has What It Takes. Is my last book. The Writer's Guide to the End of Self-Doubt. That was what immediately came to me, that I have to write. And I said, well, okay, that's it. I asked myself that question at whatever I was, 45. And I'd never asked myself that question. Never. And I don't know what I would have answered earlier when I was 30 or 35 or 40. If you could write anything, regardless if it got published, and whatever that answer is, that's what you should be writing. And if you don't know, your job is to find out.
That's kind of what I was aiming at with your God is Evolution story. One of the things that seemed to launch open for you was this sort of public speaking aspect of it's an adjunct to your writing career, obviously.
Yeah.
That you hadn't been aware of or
I hadn't
think about before.
You know what's funny too about that one time I was in the restaurant and they had this big group meeting and they paired us all up and they said, okay, everybody come up with ideas to help the restaurant. Each group come up with ideas and then each group describe their ideas to the rest of it. And it's a big restaurant, so there was probably 40 or 50 people there. And so for my group, they said, well, Bill, you go be the one to, I was like, no problem. So I got up on the stairs because they want everybody to stand up there where everybody could see him. And I said, well, we should do this and blah, blah, blah. And what I was talking about didn't matter much to me, but I was public speaking. And after I was down, after I got finished, people were like, what the hell, Bill? What? Whoa, that was really something. They were praising me, which I like. But also I could tell how it felt to do it. It was so natural. It was so easy. And I remember that whole night, everything went well for me. Like my tips were bigger. I was helping people out. I'd never been happier. And all because I just gave myself one opportunity to do this thing that I'm, I guess, meant to do. One of the things that I am most naturally meant to do, that I had not been letting myself do for whatever reason.
When you consider that, 95% of Americans would rather die than speak in public.
Well, they'd rather be in the grave than giving the eulogy.
Yeah.
And I get it. I get why it's scary. And I get nervous, but I love it.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Well, Bill, thank you.
Thank you.
You have helped me so much. And just this past week, things have started to crack open for me. I'm not even sure what to do with all the ideas that are pouring through. And it's been absolutely wonderful. So I hope those in our audience will take to heart what you say if they possibly can, because I think it's the avenue to really finding yourself as a creative writer.
You find who you are and the success will follow. Do not chase success. Just find what you love and the success will surprise you.
Go that way.
That way. That way. Go that way.
Oh, thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you.